By destroying the Death Star, the Rebel Alliance had made itself a force to be reckoned with, showing that the Empire could be beaten. But the Empire would not take this lying down, and was preparing to avenge their defeat. This Wizards and Warriors series on the Galactic Civil War in the Star Wars universe continues with the aftermath of the Battle of Yavin and the battles of Roggusfast and Mako-ta. If you're forming an alliance yourself, be it of rebels or good customers, check out the new feature from our sponsor Squarespace. As well as making websites easy, they now provide a way to make a gated, members-only portal online to create a community in a way that's both easy and private. They allow you to manage your members, do bulk emailing, get audience insights, and generate revenue through the content your site offers. You can talk to your people like it was a social network. There's a fully integrated comment system with threads, replies, and likes, allowing engagement with your main content or with blogs you can create with powerful internal tools. You can cross-post between your community and other social media profiles to ensure your archives will never be incomplete. If you need higher-level features for making your operation a serious business, you can use Squarespace extensions, third-party tools for managing inventory, marketing, bookkeeping, tax, and shipping all together, whether you're selling on the internet or sending things to a galaxy far, far away. The best way to start is by using our special offer. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/wizardsandwarriors to save 10% off your first website or domain. The Battle of Yavin was the harbinger of the new era, and the whole galaxy would start using "after the Battle of Yavin" to denote the years after this dramatic change in the galaxy. The Rebel Alliance was now considered an effective organization, and soon those oppressed by the Empire started to flock to the rebel cause in the thousands. However, the rebels knew that the Empire would strike back, and that they needed to abandon their main base on Yavin 4. So after a brief ceremony, in which the heroes of the Rebel Alliance, Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, were awarded medals of bravery, they immediately began their evacuation. During the preparations, Leia Organa snuck away with her compatriot Yvonne Verlaine, who was the only Gold Squadron fighter to survive the battle. Both from Alderaan, their mission was to rescue those remaining Alderaanians who were off-world at the time of the disaster, as they were being hunted by the Empire. They managed to save a large number of Alderaanians using Sullust as their base, and after a brief battle above Sullust, which saw the Alderaanians victorious, she left Verlaine in command and returned alone to Yavin, where the evacuation was still underway. Meanwhile, Emperor Palpatine was purging many of the old officers, replacing them with officers who were skilled and daring. The Navy was reorganized down to the TIE Fighter squadrons so as to combat the quicker X-Wing pilots more efficiently. Imperial ships were immediately sent out to hunt all suspected rebels. The prime target was Yavin 4, but the vanguard, led by a lone Imperial Star Destroyer, was foiled, and the rebel fleet managed to escape. General Draven knew that Yavin would mean nothing if the rebels did not capitalize on it, so he urged for an immediate assault to cripple the Empire's war industry and selected Simoon 1 in the Corellian Industrial Cluster as the target, as its sabotage would be a setback for the Empire. Captain Solo was to lead the mission, along with the crew of the Millennium Falcon. He pretended to be an envoy of Jabba the Hutt, as the Empire was making a deal for resources with the Hutt, and it was known that Solo used to work for the crime boss. The rebels were able to infiltrate the factory, setting the reactor to explode, freeing a number of slaves in the process. However, the arrival of Darth Vader changed things. The rebels attempted to kill the Sith as he landed, but failed. The Emperor's enforcer sensed the presence of the pilot who had destroyed the Death Star, so he took command of the garrison, eager to catch the rebels. Vader forced his way into the factory, despite the heavy resistance his troops faced, with the former slaves now aiding the rebels, and managed to find Luke and nearly killed him had it not been for Solo's intervention with a commandeered AT-AT Walker, which they used to blast their way out. The rebels managed to escape to the Millennium Falcon after Luke set the reactor off, destroying the factory. This Imperial setback gave the rebels some breathing room, allowing Luke to continue his mission to find a suitable location for a new base. The rebellion continued its guerrilla-style operations, and one of the missions conducted during this period was to free the senators held in the Arth Eno prison upon Coruscant to be executed. The operation was led by Eneb Ray, who was one of the few rebel spies on Coruscant. He was able to infiltrate the facility, but soon after learned that the Emperor was personally visiting the prison to watch the execution. The spy contacted Leia, who gave the green light to alter the plan. Ray gathered all local agents, and they disguised themselves as the imprisoned senators. The rebels ambushed the Emperor as the execution was underway, seemingly killing him. But to Eneb's dismay, he discovered it was a decoy, and the real Palpatine was aboard a ship overlooking the facility, which exploded just as he planned, with only Eneb surviving. Palpatine had not only gotten rid of the rebellious senators and spies of Coruscant, but he used the event to frame it as a terrorist attack made by the Rebel Alliance. At this same time, the Emperor blamed Vader for the recent failures of the Empire and humiliated him by stripping him of his role as second-in-command, sending him on small diplomatic missions and checking on garrison commands. Simultaneously, Palpatine hired scientist Silo to create a cybernetic replacement for Vader. All of this drove Vader to employ bounty hunters Boba Fett and Black Krrsantan to find the mysterious Force-sensitive pilot who destroyed the Death Star. In the hopes of building his own secret power base, Vader also recruited the archaeologist and droid expert Dr. Cheli Afra to build him a private army of droids. Despite their best abilities, the bounty hunters failed to catch Luke, with only Fett coming close. He was able to give Vader the name of his prey, Skywalker. Vader knew that name from his past life, and that sent him into a ceaseless search for Luke that would ultimately steer the course of the war. That course would start on the planet Vrogus Vas. The planet was used as a refueling depot for the Alliance, housing a few rebel squadrons, that included Luke's Red Squadron. Vader learned from Afra that Luke was on Vrogus Vas, and that one of his possible replacements, Mon Calamari cyborg Commander Carbin, was sent by the Emperor to capture the rebel. In order to get to the rebel pilot before Carbin, Vader flew to Vrogus Vas on his own without any reinforcements. Coming out of hyperspace to find 3 rebel fighter squadrons in front of him, Vader initially thought it was a trap, possibly set by Afra, but the latter frantically denied it. In reality, the rebels were just as surprised, as they were doing training maneuvers. Nevertheless, they engaged Vader, thinking he was a scout, and despite Afra's insistence that he retreat, the Emperor's enforcer charged directly at them, citing it should be they who should run from him. Thus began the Battle of Vrogus Vas. The rebel pilots thought that the TIE fighter they perceived as a scout would be easy to dispose of, but it was Vader who was one of the best pilots in the galaxy. His TIE Advance made quick work of Blue Squadron, annihilating them with such precision and speed that they had no time to fall back nor counter him. Next came the Yellow Squadron, made of Y-Wings, who targeted him with their proton torpedoes. This also didn't work, as Vader caused them to detonate prematurely with the Force, annihilating the whole squadron in the process. Before he could do the same to Red Squadron, he was charged by a lone X-Wing, which broke formation and charged at him, dodging all of his fire. This was Luke, which the Sith discovered moments after their ships collided with one another, causing both to crash down onto the planet, just as Luke had intended, hoping that it would kill Vader. The Red leader, Ahul Nara, immediately sent out a signal to the rebel command, informing them that Vader had been shot down on Vrogus Vas and asking for immediate assistance to get rid of the Emperor's most capable and deadly asset. Princess Leia and the crew of the Millennium Falcon would answer the call, departing the main fleet with the land troopers of Delta Squad. Simultaneously, Afra, who lost communications with Vader, decided to join the fray to confirm if he was still alive and see if she could aid in the capture of Luke. On the planet, the rebels were trying to kill Vader and help Luke. The rebel command then sent the Y-Wing Grey Squadron to bomb his location, but before they started their run, Vader used the Force to toss stones and the wreckage of his fighter, managing to destroy all of the Y-Wings. Eventually he was surrounded by an entire armored company that demanded his surrender, telling him he was hopelessly outnumbered. to which he replied, "All I am surrounded by is fear, and dead men." A force user of considerable strength, Vader was just too strong for the rebel troopers, despite the fact they had tanks with them. Using the force, he detonated their grenades, and then used his lightsaber and force choke to dispose of the remaining troopers. Despite his power, the fighting took up most of the day, with Vader having to deal with the reinforcing battalion as well. Meanwhile, Dr. Aphra had arrived, accompanied by her 2 droids, and began hunting Skywalker. Using subterfuge, she managed to capture the young rebel, but the timely arrival of Han Solo and Chewbacca saved the situation, and they escaped on the Falcon. On the other side of the battlefield, Vader was attacked by a rebel T-47 airspeeder belonging to the Cyan Squadron, but it wasn't nearly enough to kill him, and the airspeeder was destroyed. Leia meanwhile had taken the Delta Squad and attacked Vader, but the troopers were no match for him and were soon killed. Leia was left as the only survivor, as Vader hoped that Luke would come to her aid. She knew this would happen, so she caused the Y-Wing Amber Squadron to bomb her position, hoping that it would kill Vader in the process. However, before the squadron started its bombing run, it was attacked and destroyed by a TIE Fighter squadron belonging to the Imperial force led by Commander Karbin that just arrived. The leak picked up by Aphra had been intentional. Karbin wanted Vader to destroy the rebels, and then mop up what was left on Vrogas Vas and capture Skywalker. Vader couldn't leave this challenge unopposed, and as soon as Karbin landed on the planet, he was attacked by the Sith, which in turn allowed Leia to escape to aid Han Solo and Chewbacca. Although Karbin was cybernetically enhanced, he stood no chance against a Sith Lord, and was quickly killed. This gave the crew of the Falcon enough time to escape the planet, despite the fact that they were attacked by Aphra and Crescenton, the former of which they captured. The Battle of Vrogas Vas was one of the worst losses the Rebel Alliance suffered in the early portion of the conflict. Not only had they lost a refueling depot, but also grey, yellow and blue X-Wing squadrons, amber and grey Y-Wing squadrons, nearly all of the ground forces and equipment were also lost, while the Imperials had sustained minimal damage. Despite the losses suffered at Vrogas Vas, the rebellion was still capable of hurting the Empire, and soon was back on the offensive, starting a campaign within the Mid-Rim that would allow them to steadily gain a foothold in the region. Meanwhile, the Emperor sent Vader to Shu Torun, a planet vital for the Empire due to its richness in ore used for its war machine. The recently ascendant queen of the planet, Trios, was facing a rebellion of the nobles, led by Duke Rubix, who protested her rule and, by extension, the Empire. To assist Trios, Vader quickly set about finding dissident nobles and put down the rebellion by one ABY. Vader's ruthlessness rehabilitated him in Palpatine's eyes, and he was once again second only to the Emperor himself. Once again in command, Vader swiftly purged many Imperials, all of whom were blamed for the successes of the rebellion. During the Shu Torun War, the rebels' main fleet had made a base in the Outer Rim at the abandoned mako-ta space station, and from there it was able to conduct effective sorties throughout the galaxy, as well as give their ships a much-needed refitting. They established contact with other rebel cells, and the rebellion was more unified than any time before. However, Vader's purge managed to inspire the Imperials, and the rebels knew that he would seek a pitched battle, so they needed a larger fleet. Their next target was to get more allies and a bigger fleet to even the odds. One of the groups that still hadn't rejoined the rebels was the Partisans of Saw Gerrera, who still resisted the Empire on Jeddah. The Imperials were still in need of the Kyber crystals mined on this planet, and Vader, knowing the Shu Torun's affinity for engineering, asked Queen Tyros to be in charge of this operation. Leia and Trios initially fought against each other, but Leia was able to use diplomatic skills and the Queen's distaste for Vader's tactics to recruit her to the rebellion. Princess Leia then returned to Mako-ta. She and Admiral Akbar were convinced that the people of Mon Cala were likely to rebel, and the Mon Cala mercantile fleet was nothing to laugh at, as their cruisers were capable of being refitted into effective warships. This is what led the Empire to subjugate the planet prior to the war, and that event was still fresh in the minds of many of the Mon Calamari. Taking the crew of the Millennium Falcon as well as Admiral Akbar himself, Leia set up a meeting with the regent of Mon Cala, Dors Urtia, to discuss the transfer of the mercantile fleet to the rebellion. They were interrupted by an Imperial squadron while discussing this and barely managed to escape. Urtia declined to support the rebellion, fearing the Imperial retribution, and so the rebels returned empty-handed. This did not deter Leia, however, and she proposed to High Command that they free the King of Mon Cala, Li Cha, who was imprisoned in an Imperial base on Strockhill Prime. They conducted a brief operation in which they kidnapped Moff Tan Hubi, the unofficial governor of Mon Cala, and replaced him with a recruited changeling who impersonated the Moff, while Leia set off for Strockhill Prime with the captured Moff. Once they infiltrated the base, they found Li Cha in a debilitated state, having never recovered from his wounds during the invasion and living only while attached to life support machines. Despite this, he was able to give them a message, voicing his support for the people of Mon Cala to rise up and fight their oppressors. As he was finishing, Moff Hubi set off the alarm, which prompted a firefight that killed both Li Cha and Hubi. Nevertheless, the rebels were able to escape the base with the king's last words, which they took to Mon Cala. Urtia met them once more, but confiscated the message and arrested them, not giving them to the Imperials, but instead keeping them detained, as he was still trying to protect Mon Cala. This would never be enough to save his planet, as he soon learned that the Imperials, worried about the rebel activity in the region, were preparing to confiscate the mercantile fleet. Urtia knew that the Mon Cala could bear no such humiliation, and responded by playing Li Cha's message. This led to the Mon Calamari rising up and joining the rebels, killing all the stormtroopers aboard the fleet. The mercantile fleet, made up of 13 Mon Cala MC-80A Home 1 type heavy star cruisers, now needed to head for Mako-ta in order to be refitted with turbolasers and other tools of war. But before the fleet managed to leave the gravity well of the planet, 5 Imperial II-class star destroyers, commanded by Admiral Tyrus Maori, entered the system and joined the 6th that was garrisoned here. Maori knew that the mercantile fleet lacked weapons, and that in their current form, Mon Cala cruisers were no match for his star destroyers, so he blockaded the rebellious ships and was overall slow to act. This allowed Admiral Akbar enough time to respond to the Millennium Falcon's plea for help, and his own MC-80A arrived in the system, supported by a few wings of Y-wing bombers and X-wing starfighters. Maori recognized that the new enemy ship had changed the balance of power, but also realized that his 6 star destroyers would be too much for one Mon Cala star cruiser to attack. He still hoped that the mercantile fleet could be captured, so instead of destroying them with his superior firepower, he ordered his contingent of TIE bombers to disable the helpless merchant ships. All this hesitation allowed Akbar to bring his forces closer to the planet, and when the TIE bombers reached the mercantile fleet and started bombing their engines, they were quickly intercepted by the rebel X and Y wings, who had an easy time running the Imperial blockade. The rebel starfighters were just plainly better at dogfighting than the TIE bombers, and soon took the upper hand, crushing the enemy and creating a new situation. Our sources are not clear if Maori's directive was strictly capturing the mercantile fleet, but we know that he ordered his star destroyers to only open fire in the case that the Mon Cala ships tried to break the blockade. The rebels knew that it was only a matter of time before more Imperials joined this siege, making their situation even more untenable. So Akbar asked Captain Pike Leela of Aurora Flare to act. Although it was suicidal, Leela knew that she had to sacrifice her ship to help her people and the rebellion. Thus, Aurora Flare started making its way towards Maori's flagship, Aquilifer. The Imperials opened fire and were close to overloading the ship's shields. Leela ordered all energy to be diverted to the forward shields, hoping that they would hold long enough. At this point, Maori was informed that Aurora Flare was transporting coaxium, the highly volatile hyperfuel, which meant that the explosion of the Mon Cala ship could destroy Aquilifer too. Miori commanded his ship to take evasive maneuvers, but it was too late. Leela ignited her cargo and then rammed into Aquilifer. The cruiser was gone, and although the Imperial Star Destroyer was not destroyed, it was disabled, which broke the blockade and allowed the rebel ships to first leave the planet's gravity and then join Akbar. Soon, the rebels jumped to hyperspace on their way to Mako-ta. The Imperials, obviously angry with this, bombarded the planet for some time, killing many locals, including Urcha. Still, this was a massive victory for the rebels, who increased the size of their navy twofold. The ships came to the great satisfaction of both the rebels at Mako-ta and their Mon Calamari crews, who could now fight their dreaded enemy. To refit the cruisers, Leia recruited Queen Trios of Shu-Torun, who she had befriended following a mission on Jeddah. Trios put her engineers to work, making the cruisers into very formidable warships, and at their completion they were to be showcased to the allies of the Rebel Alliance at a grand celebration. Trios and many other sympathizers were invited. Morale was high at the base, with a flyby by Luke Skywalker and his fellow pilots, an overview of the Grand Fleet, which was comprised of 37 star cruisers, including 5 MC-75s, 12 MC-80 Liberties, 2 MC-80A Home 1s, 3 Mon Calamari Yavin's Hope types, 8 Mon Calamari cruisers Geist type, and other Mon Calamari cruisers, complemented by dozens of starfighters. With the overview complete, Mon Mothma gave a rousing speech, promising that their fleet, their hidden sword, would free the galaxy and aid their allies whenever they were in danger. But just as the selected cruisers were to jump into hyperspace at the end of the speech, they did not move. Leia tried to contact Queen Trios to see if there was an engineering problem, but was informed she had left for her ship. The grim reality of what had happened set in when Darth Vader's Death Squadron exited hyperspace not far from Mako-ta. An Executor-class Star Dreadnought, 3 Imperial II-class destroyers, and a large complement of starfighters were closing in to the rebel base, led by Vader and his second-in-command, Admiral Kendall Ozzel. The rebels called for all hands on deck, but found their cruisers locked down, their weapon systems down, and their engines unresponsive. As the cargo bay doors would not open, the rebels would not be able to scramble their fighters. It was a trap. That run-in Leia had had with Trios on Jeddah was not by chance. Vader had given the rebels time to muster their strength and planted Trios in the rebellion so he could find and crush them in one place, a move not unlike the one Admiral Thrawn had done in the Lothal campaign. Vader ordered all ships to open fire upon the nearest cruiser, which was General Vanden Willard's ship, the Yavin's Hope, and it was destroyed within a matter of seconds, killing the crew and Willard. When Admiral Ozzel asked Vader for the next target, Vader responded, "Hope. Hope dies." Knowing that their situation depended upon undoing what the Shu-Torans did, Leia and General Bandwin Khor led a boarding party to capture Trios, who had fled to her ship, which was still docked by Rebel command. They were able to take the ship after a brief firefight, but Trios made it to the escape pod with seconds to spare and escaped. The rebels searched her ship, hoping to find anything that would free their vessels, but failed. The only thing the rebels managed to do was find a way to bypass the Shu-Toran lock on the bay doors. They could be opened by a ship by transmitting the codes obtained from Trios' vessel. They had to act fast, so General Khor took a small craft and attempted to transmit the codes, but his ship was destroyed by TIE fighters, which were killing anyone who fled the base or the cruisers. The rebel situation was desperate when the Millennium Falcon appeared behind the Imperial fleet, manned by Captain Solo, Chewbacca and C-3PO. They were immediately contacted by Leia, who told Solo what he needed to do. With nothing else to do, Solo made way for the nearest cruiser, Jan Dodana's Republic. Dodging TIE fighters along the way, as well as destroying a few turbo lasers on one of the Star Destroyers, they nearly made it to the cruiser before they were engaged by Darth Vader himself in his advanced TIE. Solo tried to shake Vader, but was unsuccessful, as the latter was still the best pilot in the galaxy. The captain of the Millennium Falcon needed some kind of distraction to achieve his goal, and it came when the rebel cruiser of Commander Lajaya was destroyed by the Imperial Star Destroyers. Solo took advantage of the explosion and flew into the Inferno, losing Vader in the process. This gave him some breathing room, and he flew towards the Republic. C-3PO was jettisoned from the Falcon in an escape pod directly towards one of the airlocks of the cruiser and crawled into one of the Republic's airlocks. The droid found Luke and told him about the bypass, and the hangar doors were soon open, allowing the young rebel to immediately board his X-Wing and fly out. Seeing this, Wedge Antilles and the rest of the pilots followed Luke, which all formed up upon him. Needing a call sign, Luke dubbed them Rogue Squadron in honor of Jyn Erso's squadron, and immediately formed around Solo in order to allow the damaged Falcon to escape the battle. With the rest of the squadron fighting the enemy starfighters, Luke activated his light trail in order to catch Admiral Akbar's attention and demonstrate how to open the hangar doors. This succeeded, and the fighters on Akbar's Home 1 joined the Rogue Squadron. Solo managed to land his vessel, and as the rebels needed all the help they could get, the captain of the Millennium Falcon manned an X-Wing and entered the combat. Meanwhile, on Mako-ta, the rebels finally caught a break. As they were searching through Trios's files, they discovered a way to free their ships, as there appeared to be an override code that could reboot the systems. The bad news was that those codes were aboard the Executor. It was becoming clear that the release of the rebel starfighters was not enough to save the day, as even more cruisers were going down. Vader ordered all of the TIE squadrons to leave their carriers and join the battle, which allowed the Empire to recapture the initiative yet again. It was time for desperate action, so Captain Draven and Leia took Trios's ship, accompanied by Draven's special forces, and started making way towards the Executor. Leia pretended to be the Queen, and as they had the correct responder codes, the rebels were able to successfully land aboard. The time they had was short, as Vader decided that his personal involvement was no longer needed, so he was on his way to the Executor to greet Trios. The team was able to get the codes, but they were soon discovered, and the Emperor's enforcer was now hot on their trail. Still, Leia was able to escape with the codes, using a commandeered TIE fighter, while the rest of the special forces and Draven stayed behind to slow down Vader. The Sith killed all of them. This was not the end of the danger for the Alderaanian princess. She had no way to signal her allies. Solo and Skywalker almost shot her down. However, Leia used the fact that the Imperial starfighters considered her to be one of their own. She shot down a TIE fighter, which convinced the rebels of her friendly intentions. Luke and Solo picked her up and escorted her to the Republic. The rebels started the transmission process. Unfortunately for them, it would take some time for the weapons and other systems to come online, and the Death Squadron continued to pound the cruisers. Trying to salvage his ship, Dodonna immediately jumped to hyperspace. Vader, however, was not concerned by this, as he had already caused a severe blow to the rebels, and he just ordered his Star Destroyers to keep firing. Thankfully for the rebels, Luke and Leia managed to convince Dodonna to return to the fight. Returning to the system from another angle, Republic made a strafing run over the top of the Executor, damaging Vader's flagship and grabbing the attention of the Imperial fleet. The Death Squadron was forced to reposition in order to cover the Executor, and this gave enough time for the remaining cruisers to come back online and join the fight. But Dodonna knew that the battle was already over and ordered the fleet to disperse. With his cruisers' engines destroyed, he intended to hold the Imperials off, and his crew fought to the bitter end as the rest of the fleet escaped. The Battle of Mako-ta was a severe blow to the Rebel Alliance, as they lost 90% of their starfighters, 18 of their cruisers, as well as many of their veteran commanders, while the Empire's losses were limited to TIE fighters and stormtroopers. The Rebel fleet dispersed and was ordered to fight separately, with no base to link up at and no plan. They were divided and scattered and were once again at square one. The battle, while not the total annihilation Vader had hoped for, was satisfactory to the Emperor, as the rebels no longer posed the threat they once did. Indeed, this led to a steady weakening of the rebellion with the beginning of the Mid-Rim Retreat. While the Alliance would try to outrun the Empire and could hide effectively, Vader promised that they couldn't hide forever. The Empire was on the offensive. Our series on the Galactic Civil War in the Star Wars universe will continue in the upcoming weeks, and we're planning to cover the battles throughout many fantasy universes and sci-fi sagas, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing as it helps immensely. We'll try to read and respond to every comment as we want to see what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.